and welcome to Fireside Chat with Crohn's. Today I have Evy O'Leary-Bennett. Welcome, Evy.
Hi, thanks.
And this is fun because we're actually in person here rather than calling in, so this is great. You'll have to pardon us as we get used to talking to the computer and to ourselves at the same time.
That's right.
So bear with us. But welcome, Evy. And I would like to do a quick little bio for everyone who's listening today. Evy is a nurse, registered nurse, a licensed counselor. She's an advanced craniosacral therapist, native Montanan, who enjoys working with children and adults and all ages, actually, in her private practice. She loves gardening, her animals, and music. She has been bringing music to her private practice through toning, and I can tell you that as someone who has had the privilege of listening to her sing and tone in our gatherings and at concerts in the city, she is a very gifted singer. So today, Evy is going to be talking to us about spiritual equality. So welcome, Evy.
Well,
and let me
thanks.
turn my chair a little bit here so that we're closer and we're actually discussing and talking with
That's
each
right.
other. So tell me about it. What are your thoughts on spiritual equality, and why this subject? Why did you choose this one to have our conversation here?
As I thought over what needs to be talked about the most, from my perspective as a counselor and a healer, is that so many have come to believe that they don't deserve to heal.
Okay.
And so because of that, I went on this big exploration about what is it and how did we learn that we're not equal. So this is a big thing, of course, generations after generations on the planet. So
Right.
this is a huge concept that the more we delve into it and start looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
the more complex and yet simplistic it becomes.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. So the part that we're really looking at now on the planet is going from a Piscean age, where God's up on top
Okay.
and we're down here, to the age of Aquarius, where we're riding together.
You know, Evy, I have to tell you, I love that explanation of the difference between the Piscean age and the Aquarian age. I'm a Pisces, and, you know, for some time it was like, well, there's nothing wrong with our age. I mean, we're kind of nice people. We're all really cool. And I never quite understood why everybody was in this rush to leave the Piscean age and go into the Aquarian age, because I didn't understand the concept of riding together, and that in Piscean age, God is here and we are here. So personally, thank you for that explanation, because now it sheds so much more light on what the whole emphasis is in moving in that direction. So thank you.
Good. So in this concept where God's up here and we're down here, is that we have to go through an intermediary. And on the planet, so far, it's been males mostly that tell us how to look and be with this source here.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to a place where we're one with source. We're co-creating with source. We ride with source.
Okay.
So that really means to take some ownership of our path, that we get to ride the boat now. We get to be the captains of our boat.
Yeah.
And we're not riding on somebody else's ship.
Okay.
And so that doesn't mean not to be supportive towards each other on this journey, but it means each one of us has to be supportive of ourselves first.
Okay.
And because we're taught that God's way up here and we're way down here, that it becomes more difficult, I think, to really encourage people to be with the concept of the indwelling.
Okay.
That source is in every single cell of our beingness, that we're not separate. And because of this hierarchical way of looking at spirituality, there hasn't been the ownership of a concept that says we can heal. And that might sound like a paradox.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get to is that because we're trying to aspire to something so big and so great, so outside of ourselves, we created this martyrdom business.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, this
Yeah.
business of that the only way I can be good enough for this big source up here is if I'm stricken, if I'm punished, if I suffer on this planet. And the more I get with these concepts, the more I understand the best we can be on this planet is of joy, of support, of some fun. And when people come to me with their troubledness and it's all about suffering, I say, well, what if therapy's kind of fun?
Yeah,
And
that's
they
an
look
idea.
at you like, well, therapy isn't fun. Therapy's very serious and you have to suffer. You suffer in therapy and it's hard work. And it's not. It's our natural right to heal.
Hi, and welcome to Fireside Chat with Crohn's. Today I have Evy O'Leary-Bennett. Welcome, Evy.
Hi, thanks.
And this is fun because we're actually in person here rather than calling in, so this is great. You'll have to pardon us as we get used to talking to the computer and to ourselves at the same time. So bear with us. But welcome, Evy. And I would like to do a quick little bio for everyone who's listening today. Evy is a nurse, registered nurse, a licensed counselor. She's an advanced craniosacral therapist, native Montanan, who enjoys working with children and adults and all ages, actually, in her private practice. She loves gardening, her animals, and music. She has been bringing music to her private practice through toning, and I can tell you that as someone who has had the privilege of listening to her sing and tone in our gatherings and at concerts in the city, she is a very gifted singer. So today, Evy is going to be talking to us about spiritual equality. So welcome, Evy.
Well,
and let me
thanks.
turn my chair a little bit here so that we're closer and we're actually discussing and talking with
That's
each
right.
other. So tell me about it. What are your thoughts on spiritual equality and why this subject? Why did you choose this one to have our conversation here?
As I thought over what needs to be talked about the most, from my perspective as a counselor and a healer, is that so many have come to believe that they don't deserve to heal.
Okay.
And so because of that, I went on this big exploration about what is it and how did we learn that we're not equal. So this is a big thing, of course, generations after generations on the planet. So
Right.
This is a huge concept that the more we delve into it and start looking at it, the more complex and yet simplistic it becomes.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. So the part that we're really looking at now on the planet is going from a Piscean age, where God's up on top and we're down here, to the age of Aquarius, where we're riding together.
You know, Evy, I have to tell you, I love that explanation of the difference between the Piscean age and the Aquarian age. I'm a Pisces. And, you know, for some time it was like, well, there's nothing wrong with our age. I mean, we're kind of nice people. We're all really cool. And I never quite understood why everybody was in this rush to leave the Piscean age and go into the Aquarian age, because I didn't understand the concept of riding together, and that in Piscean age, God is here and we are here. So personally, thank you for that explanation, because now it sheds so much more light on what the whole emphasis is in moving in that direction. So thank you.
Good. So in this concept where God's up here and we're down here, is that we have to go through an intermediary. And on the planet, so far, it's been males mostly that tell us how to look and be with this source here. And now we're going to a place where we're one with Source. We're co-creating with Source. We ride with Source.
Okay.
So that really means to take some ownership of our path, that we get to ride the boat now. We get to be the captains of our boat.
Yeah.
And we're not riding on somebody else's ship.
Okay.
And so that doesn't mean not to be supportive towards each other on this journey, but it means each one of us has to be supportive of ourselves first. Okay. And because we're taught that God's way up here and we're way down here, that it becomes more difficult, I think, to really encourage people to be with the concept of the indwelling. Okay. That Source is in every single cell of our beingness, that we're not separate. And because of this hierarchical way of looking at spirituality, there hasn't been the ownership of a concept that says we can heal. And that might sound like a paradox. Yeah. But what I'm trying to get to is that because we're trying to aspire to something so big and so great, so outside of ourselves, we created this martyrdom business.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, this business of that the only way I can be good enough for this big Source up here is if I'm stricken, if I'm punished, if I suffer on this planet. And the more I get with these concepts, the more I understand the best we can be on this planet is of joy, of support, of some fun. And when people come to me with their troubledness and it's all about suffering, I say, well, what if therapy's kind of fun?
Yeah,
and they look at you like, well, therapy isn't fun. Therapy's very serious and you have to suffer. You suffer in therapy and it's hard work. And it's not. It's our natural right to heal. And we've been told and entrained so much that we are our suffering. I'm my story of how I got hurt when I was 4.
Okay, yeah.
I'm my story of when I got sick when a boss fired me. I'm my story when my mom was critical. That's me. And in a spiritual way, that's what happened to us. That's not who we are.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Yet, but we've been so convinced that we're these stories where we get caught.
Right.
So to come to an equality in Source now means we have to allow it.
Okay, take that even more. Give us some examples.
I'm scooting in.
Thanks, Evy. Now I can see you.
Okay, so no. Good. So the indwelling spirit. Whew, big concept. We've been so taught and trained to compete that they're better than me, they're less than me. That this is better, that's worse. The paradoxes. This is good, that's bad. This is pretty, this is ugly. And so we're in such a state of comparison all the time that we don't understand that Source would really prefer to relax with us.
Oh, I love that. I really like that. Relaxing with Source. That's great.
Yeah, because then there's no competition with ourselves. And so many of our anxiety disorders and depressions, wanting to commit suicide, these whole ideas stem from we're not okay to be quiet in who we are.
Oh, I love that.
We've been so taught that we're not okay, that we can't relax with Source.
Yeah.
And relaxing with Source is our healing. It's the healing for the planet. And we're so taught to be competitive
Mm-hmm.
that there's no room for peacefulness.
I love that. I think those are things that we haven't really thought about before. That
No.
by being competitive, we're not allowing the peace to be a part of our life.
Right.
The being driven to be the type A personality.
Right, and that's good.
We're not given
Right.
permission to not be a type A. I mean, so I love that. I'm going to ask you to kind of define it even more in detail as an example of actual everyday life. So how is someone who comes in and speaks with you and you see this in their, realm of how they're living their life, how do you support them into getting out of the competitiveness into a peacefulness in their everyday? How do you help them to bring that concept more alive in their life?
Well, you have to challenge.
Okay.
You have to challenge the competition.
Okay.
You have to challenge the concept that they're not all right. For example, working with a young person who wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because she got so involved in the competition within her peer group. Okay. And the peers were telling her that she was fat and ugly and backstabbing that kind of competitiveness of young women,
Mm-hmm.
adolescent girls, and that she wanted so badly to get out of that struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Of not being okay, everybody not feeling okay with each other, not trusting each other, not trusting herself, that she wanted to get away from it, and then of course tried pills and things. Okay, so to start to challenge that is to say, well, that's a cultural thing.
Okay.
This competitiveness, you learned it, you were trained with it, and it's not who you are as a soul. And maybe you can learn that.
Okay.
And maybe we can learn that it's people that are hurt that keep hurting each other. And it's not really who they are or how they want to be,
mm-hmm.
but they're so entrained to talk and behave that way.
Yes.
Right. So anyway, and then of course bringing humor into it. Well, isn't that typical young women? Yeah, bashing each other. Right. Calling each other fat asses. I mean, those
mm-hmm.
kinds of things. And so to really challenge the concepts of, yeah, that's what you've been through, and that's kind of energetically where you got stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not truth because you're not even overweight.
Right.
If you took the national average, you're a darling. You're cute.
Yeah.
You're not fat.
Yeah.
Okay, but the pain of it was real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because of this inequality. Okay. That I'm only okay if I'm pencil thin, if I look and behave this way in this group. Okay. So there has to become a different way for the girls to interact with each other that confronts the story that we have to be beautiful, we have to be really skinny, we have to be this or that. That maybe we can come to a place where we accept that we've been hurt. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that these concepts have been passed on from generation to generations of competition, of not feeling okay about ourselves. Maybe that's the part that needs to be challenged and healed. Okay. So it takes it from, I'm not okay, I'm not worthy, to, whoa, this is a cultural pattern. And it's a really hurtful cultural pattern. So how do I now make some space in me, push those concepts out and away so that we can have room and space for Source, the divine, mm-hmm. to be indwelling and soften these hurts so that in turn we don't act out in hurt, whether towards harming ourselves through cutting or trying to kill ourselves, yes. Or being mean, cruel back.
Exactly. Yeah. It's even the mean girl concept, or the bully concept is part of that. It's built on that competition.
Right.
And it you know, the whole level of competition in our society starts at conception.
Yeah. Oh, before that even.
Yeah, because for young marrieds, then the first one to get pregnant, I got to be the first one, or Sally's pregnant now, I got to be pregnant. I mean, it's just a constant, reoccurring regurgitation of the same concept.
Right. That I only prove myself if I create more babies.
Yes, exactly.
I wish I would have paid attention to it on Facebook the other day. There was a study done with young black children. And I think there are probably about, I would guess, 6 or 7 years old in this study. And they had a black baby doll and they had a white baby doll. And they were naked dolls and they were just sitting on the counter. And the therapist was asking these young black children, which of these babies is the prettiest? And these young black kids would point to the white doll.
Oh my God.
And the therapist would ask, well, which child is smarter? And the black child would pick the white one.
Oh my God.
Which of these people are more successful? Which baby's more? They would point to the white one. Then they would ask the child, well, which baby is most like you? And they would point to the black child because they were dark-skinned.
Wow, such a dissociation.
Such a dissociation. And so that child has been taught that spiritually they're not equal.
Right.
That there's no equality here. And I apologize to the listeners to this series that I didn't get the author of that study, but it was so startling and it made me weep.
Yeah.
It was so sad.
Yeah, it really is.
That even these young black children look at white and black dolls and associate a higher spiritual concept, a higher worthiness, just in a doll figure.
Yeah, exactly.
And that they associate themselves with, well, I'm bad, I'm less, I'm this because I'm there. And it was so startling to me and yet truthful. And in so many ways, when I work with married couples, there's this giving away of power because the male knows. There's not room for a softer understanding of what needs to happen in the family because of a giving away of power and inequality. And years ago in grad school, I was taught that abuse is always about inequality.
Yeah.
Abuse always is about inequality. So when we think about that, well, yeah, if somebody's lesser than us, it's easier for us to dump our opinions on them.
Yes.
It's easier for us to believe that we know more than them. That their path is somehow less than ours, or that somehow their path is more than ours. And so for us to come into a concept that spiritually we're all equal is a phenomenal shift in consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was really thinking too, as I was preparing for today, about the troubledness coming down in Ferguson in our country because of the black man that was shot unarmed by a white officer, apparently. And now there's rioting and looting, and my husband was telling me this morning that they called in the National Guard because of looting. And so when you believe you have no power and that your children can be harmed without any consequence, then to retaliate by stealing and breaking and harming, it's because there's not a sense of equality.
Right.
That both voices have to be heard and have to be equal here to come to some kind of way of being with each other that's not violent.
Yes. Very true. It's very true. The, you can see as I listen to you talk, so many thoughts have popped into my mind. You know, that the inequality in an abusive relationship, not only of the person who's being abused, but the person who is the abuser, it's on both sides.
Of course, always both
And
sides. Yeah.
it's, you just never, I think it's one of those things where they talked about, I'm not going to quote this correctly, but one of my favorite sayings is, don't judge someone until you're able to walk in their shoes. Well,
Right.
you can't walk in someone's shoes.
No, you don't know their truth. Yeah.
You're never going to know their truth.
Right.
The only truth you're ever going to know is your truth. And when you are in equality of your truth, then that person is automatically in their equality, in their truth.
Right.
Because, if we go back to the whole Piscean and Aquarian, our spirituality is up here and it's judging us and we're down here and we're not equal to it. It comes to play in everything we do. I mean, as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking about, okay, so when I first woke up and followed the path some 20 some odd years ago, I stopped going to the church I was raised in because I never felt that I had an equal voice in it. Okay.
Right.
And I think that pretty much most organized religion has this concept, so I'm not going to say which one I went to. But then as I took classes from other teachers, there's that saying of you have to kill the teacher to move forward. It really is about you understanding your equality.
Yes.
Yourself, period. And I remember when I was searching one time for a medicine man, and I took my offering to one medicine man, and he looked at me and he said, I appreciate your offering and the honoring of that you've done towards me. But he returned the offering and said, I'm not your I cannot teach you. You already know everything. Teach yourself. Mm-hmm. It took me forever to figure out what he meant. After I got over having this hurt feeling, God, that's why I've come to you. I don't know what I'm talking about. But it really comes out in everything. Once you start to open up and wake up, this whole concept of spiritual equality and the fact you're not equal shows up every time you take a class to learn something.
Yes.
Every time.
Yes.
And it's really that you're needing to get to in the class.
Yes. And we're all teachers and students of everything.
Absolutely.
And so if I teach a class, I remind everybody in the class that everybody's my teacher in this class.
Right.
Now, I'm in the role of being the teacher in this class, but everybody in the class is now my teacher.
Exactly.
And we are now all students for everybody in the class.
Exactly. And yet, there is always, either on your experience or a student, when the classes when I've taught, there's always these students that I finally have to say, give them an example of how they're teaching me.
Right.
So that they'll break through that concept that they're not equal to me.
Right. Right.
And it's just amazing that it is so deeply ingrained in us culturally.
Oh, it's horrible. It's just horrible.
It's like, what? It's not just I'm not equal in the workplace. It's not that I'm not equal in the home place. It truly is I'm not equal spiritually.
Right, always, yeah.
And we are. I mean, that concept of I am a child of God that you hear about all the time.
Right.
Which is true. We are all children of God. But really, we are God. Because the concept of being the child puts you at an inequality.
Right, then you're always the child.
You're always the child.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's like, no, you are God.
I dwell in and with God all the time. Yes.
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 Because I am God. So it's cool.
Yeah.
So yay! It's like, whoa. So when you're working with this, what are some of the wisdoms that you can share about this inequality and how to work with it within your life on a regular basis without, making it simple? What's the wisdom? I mean, I think that's one of the things with the crones and the elders is we realize that this really is a simple concept.
Yes. Simple and very complex.
Exactly. And it's like, don't get wrapped up in the complexity of it. So,
right.
Share some of those things. What are some of the things that people can use?
Well, the thing that I really like really well, and this comes from the Berkeley Psychic Institute, is that when you see something in another person that lights you up, that has a charge to it, that has a judgment to it, to release that first in yourself.
Okay.
And to me, that is so wonderful and helpful, because when someone's telling me of a troubledness and about an abusive situation or about a situation where they're feeling stuck or frozen, then if I can release it while they're talking in myself first. Oh, I understand when I felt really frozen. I understand when I've been shunned, or somebody's been backbiting me, or, oh, I get it. Then I release it in me and then just energetically watch it as they start to contemplate it, and it'll start to shake loose in them.
So you're able to actually see that change take place in them when you release it within yourself then.
Right, energetically, right.
Okay.
You can watch people shift a consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was working with a lady who had been in an abusive relationship. She was having an affair with a married man for many, many years. And then, of course, it all blew up and she didn't win and she's the loser. And so, of course, she was accusing him of being the abusive one, the one with all the power, and she was just used. And there was no ability to reflect on, oh, I participated in that for 15 years. Oh, maybe it does have something to do with me. Yeah. Maybe I showed up for it and maybe something. Okay.
Yeah.
So while she was doing that, I was really able to reflect on the situations where I didn't take responsibility and was sad or mad or blamed another person for their opinion towards me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I could free up my own opinion of where I was stuck or how I've blamed, then I could see her start to shift.
Very interesting.
But it didn't start to shift in her until I could start to shift in me. Because we reflect back to a person energetically all the time what's going on.
Okay.
So it's a fascinating concept, though, when we feel so hurt and troubled by what people think or know about us or accuse us of. And if we can take that and then move within ourselves about that, what's my responsibility in this piece? Release that, then there's a shifting out here.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, when I'm, just as an example, so help me with this and tell me if yes, this is, if I'm understanding this correctly. Is that so? I'm looking at a woman, and I notice that how she's dressed is maybe that top's too tight for her, in my opinion. Okay, and when I take the time to reflect that what I'm seeing in her is the concept that I do not think of myself as attractive when my clothing is too tight,
Yes.
if I release and allow myself permission that that's not true, then I'm going to stop viewing her in that way, and then she can release it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Or, not or, and.
Okay.
A further delving into that is if we see somebody in a real tight outfit that's sexualized, to release in ourselves, when have I acted sexualized and not honored that I'm more than that?
Okay. Okay.
Or release the times in me when my clothes were too tight and somebody criticized me about it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, because it was like, as I was listening to you, I was getting the concept, and I was like, okay, so thinking of an example of when I have had that actual experience.
Yes.
Okay. Knowing with me sometimes if it's a repetitive thing constantly coming up in my life, an example would be, someone correcting me for something I did at work. Let's say the paper's not good enough or something. And it just seems like for 3 times it's come up. Generally it's like, oh, I believe that they're holding truth about me. And if I go in and reflect it and release it, then they no longer show up in my life.
Yes. Because it may have been something you did on the paper that would be better for the organization if it was corrected. And it may just be an idiosyncrasy too.
Yes.
But to go back in ourselves about how many times have I been critical and what I write or say is never good enough.
Yeah.
It's never good enough if I write it this way or that way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so then to clear that as soon as we can.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've discovered is I held for a very long time that I wasn't a writer for a myriad of different reasons. And lately I've been really working on it, and I've been writing. And as I've been interviewing for jobs, I've had these marvelous compliments on my resume.
Because you're good.
And I'm like, what? But it really is because, I'm a good writer.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not just writing stories, you're a good writer. So it's kind of funny, but it takes it back to no longer holding that I'm not equal to writers.
Right.
It's now showing up in my life in just everyday experiences that I'm actually a good writer.
Yes, isn't that fun?
It's fun. It's like,
it's
okay.
really fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of on the same subject, only a little bit different.
Okay.
I was walking a couple years ago. I was walking downtown, and there was what appeared to be a homeless person on the sidewalk in front of me, blue, really in a crisis state. And I was a nurse before, so I could tell by this physically blue.
Okay.
And he was Caucasian, so
wow.
So I knew he was really troubled, and I could tell by the smell that he was acidotic. So I don't know if it was from alcohol or he was a long-term diabetic or whatever, but I could tell that he was in dire straits, and I knew I needed to get some help for him. Okay. So I told the woman, I said to her, she had a cell phone, I didn't, so call 911 and we'll stay here with him until somebody comes. But I was just starting to reflect on, that poor guy. He's on the street, he's blue. A lot of things have led up to this. Yeah. This poor guy. And she said, well, what if he's just an ascended master and the only thing he has left to learn is some humility?
Yeah.
And I said, what? What? So anyway, and then I got to thinking about that, is that my judgment was homeless, stricken, really bad health, emergency, and maybe on a spiritual plane, I have no concept at all what his path is about, why he came to that moment, that crossroad. Then I wondered too, well, what was it about that I was to run into him? That I was the one to come there that day. Okay?
Yeah.
So then it becomes in me, oh, just send love you don't know.
Right.
Because this person on the sidewalk spiritually is my equal.
Exactly.
And I don't know what it is about me that has made bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
And that has, or harmful choices to my physical, I should say. And to work on forgiving myself for the choices that I've made that have put me in compromised situations.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a profound spiritual experience for me.
Much so.
Where I really, thanks to my friend, confronted my belief system about this poor, wretched person here. To, no, stop, you don't know what that soul is learning or expressing through this circumstance, and why is he so necessary in my community?
Exactly.
To point out the needs that aren't being taken care of.
Exactly.
And so we get these spiritual opportunities, and I think it's all a spiritual setup myself. That's what I think. I think this whole thing is a spiritual setup. So if we can look more about life being a spiritual setup, and what can we learn in different circumstances from a point of equality, then it lightens it.
Yes.
It takes judgment away.
Yeah.
It takes guilt away. It takes, it places more of a responsibility of soul. How do I really want to respond to this?
Yes. I think it strips away the illusion of that what we're living is real. You know, it's not, our lives are not real. They're actually, as you said, a spiritual experience. You know, we're here spiritually, not as a human body.
Right.
We're here spiritually to have this experience. So everything we do is really on a spiritual level.
Right.
And I love how you said that, because it really helps with that whole illusion concept.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, because it's really, when you look at, you're really here for a spiritual experience, not to have this body experience.
Right.
It helps to really grasp that this is all just an illusion.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how many cars you have, or
right, yeah,
friends, or actually even how many children, or if you're alone in the world or not.
Right, yeah.
Because it's about your spiritual experience.
Right. So I'm bringing another story, because I do a lot of storytelling in my my practice, just because I think it really helps. I was walking with my mom and my brother, this is many years ago, across a pedestrian bridge at the river here in our city, and at the end of the bridge were two men, and they appeared quite drunk or stoned, I don't know. One man was slumped against the rail of the bridge, and the other man had a pipe in his hand and was going to smash the one that was down low. And I came across the bridge first, and so my mother and brother were behind me. And I just walked up and got kind of close, but not too close, because he had a pipe, you know. But and all I could think of is, please don't do that, because you're hurting yourself if you hurt him. And I kept sending that to him.
Yeah.
No, whatever this is about, don't hurt yourself. Whatever this is, just put the pipe down. And I didn't say anything with my mouth. I just stood there in presence the best I could and sent a gentleness, a please. Please just put it down. Don't hurt yourself. Meaning, if he hurts his brother, he hurts himself. That's spiritually what I was sending. Pretty soon the man looked at me, put the pipe down, and then just slumped down next to the other person. And then it was over.
Yeah.
It was over. But I was able at the time to interject equality.
Right.
and
Absolutely.
and a softness that I'm not going to do anything to harm you. I just really want you to put the pipe down and
Mhm.
don't hurt yourself. And so I think in so many ways, if we can take a better stance at not rushing at judging, pushing against possible violences,
Mhm.
and soften towards it and send a different message, we
Mhm.
can have very different outcomes.
Okay. Do you think that with everything that's going on in the world, we have Ferguson, we have Gaza, um, that are in the news predominantly right now. Robin Williams just left, and all the other things besides what's probably going on in people's towns and their homes. So the story you told, holding that man and not hurting himself, for people who are not in the midst of it, is that something they can use to help impact what's going on outside their world, their immediate world?
Yes, always.
So just holding.
Just holding. Um, Most people on the planet, unfortunately, haven't been held enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why physical body work is so healing.
Mm-hmm.
The touch, the human touch, is so healing because we so crave an energy, a softness
Yes.
to make things better. So if we learn the concept of being able to hold, not with judgment, just with compassion, with love, light,
Mm-hmm.
and get out of the way, then there can be a peacefulness that becomes then self-generated.
Okay.
That just because I've been hurt doesn't mean I have to act out of that hurt
Mm-hmm.
and create more hurt. And so in the Middle East, we've got so many generations after generations
Mm-hmm.
of hurting and harming, of pillaging and conquering and pillaging and conquering, that being critical about that it continues doesn't really help. The only thing that will really help is bringing a spiritual equality.
Mm-hmm.
That if you harm the other person, you've harmed yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you become the leader then or whatever, you've already harmed yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And looking at it as, because obviously saying don't harm people isn't really a concept that's working right now. But sharing with people that if you harm them, you're harming yourself,
Right.
brings it home. You know, when you tell someone, even as our children, when we were raising them, and said, don't hurt him, well, they were hurting, so all they wanted to do was hurt someone. But when you say to them, when you hurt him, you're hurting yourself more, they understand that pain.
Right. Yes.
And then they can stop the hurting.
Right.
You know, it's teaching them a level of compassion that often gets skipped, or I'm not sure if it gets skipped, but it just isn't clear enough.
Right. And one of the concepts that I've learned so much over the years doing family work is that when something happens to one person in the family, it happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a child that learns young that they become a diabetic,
Mm-hmm.
or alcoholism in the family, or if somebody was harmed in a car wreck or some other kind of accident, that because we live in systems, that whatever happens to one person in the family energetically really happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that spiritually we're not separate from each other.
Right. Right.
So the more we can hold our own space and look at whatever the pain is being presented to us,
Mm-hmm.
heal it in ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
lighten it up in ourselves so that the other person can experience that.
Mm-hmm.
and then can be held in a space where that becomes available to them to lift it themselves.
Yes, yes. It's the ripple effect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's it's knowing that by you helping yourself, it's that concept of if you change yourself, you change the world.
Right.
If you have compassion and love toward yourself, you can have compassion and love towards others.
Right.
You know, you may think that you love someone, you're in love with someone, or you love someone, but if you really have the dialogue every day in front of the mirror or inside your head that says, well, I'm not worthy, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, I'm not pretty, you're not really loving that person because you haven't begun to love yourself yet. And once you learn to love yourself more, that love that you see and feel towards someone else blossoms even more.
Right. And because we've made the opening to be softer towards ourselves, less judgmental, of course that ripples.
Yes.
Then we're not always judging another person's experience. Because there's no way we can hardly even figure out our own experiences, let alone figure out another person's experiences.
Exactly. It's like, you're calling me for advice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I wouldn't offer it and listen and hold space for someone to, to really find their solution. But yeah, seriously, there's some mornings where it's like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the whole concept of spiritual equality really is it's a very big one.
Oh, it's
That's
huge.
a very important one in our lives.
It's huge, and especially in religions now, it's really, really important that we come to some kind of spiritual equality between men and women, between the church bodies and gay and lesbian. It's way past time.
Oh, yeah.
It's way past time, and yet there's so much fear to let go towards inequality that we have such a backlash going, hanging on to these strict rules because we're afraid if there is equality, then what do?
Yes.
We don't have power. We don't have a way to make people behave then, and it's tricky. I was around a minister the other day that gay bashes. Ooh. And of course that doesn't go well with me because some gays are my best friends. So that doesn't go well.
Right.
So it's like this imprinting about spiritual inequality is so necessary and so threatening at the same time.
Yes.
When we have to struggle towards a God that's not within us. Mm-hmm. If the indwelling source is here, then it's a no-brainer to be kind to everybody.
Right. Very true. Very, very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
And so when we get into these power struggles to maintain control, and it just has to be that way, whoa. Then compassion for ourselves where we're stuck, that it just has to be my way. Mm-hmm. Because the more we can undo in ourselves what just has to be my way, the more we open energetically to reflect that person's safe to open.
Yes.
Because apparently they're not safe enough to open, holding those mentalities that some are not equal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I read in a book, The Magician's Way by William Whitecloud. He talks about, there's a little piece in the story where there's this discussion about everybody being happy in the world, allowing everybody to be happy and do whatever it is that makes them happy. And it scares the bejesus out of everybody, because if everybody's happy, then who's in control? And it's like, but no one needs to be in control if you're doing what makes you happy.
Right.
Um, and it's like that fear of chaos drives us to inequality, because we believe we're not all equal.
Right. And then that creates chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. So it takes a few people to just make that first step, and then things will start to change. And yet we know that there were times in our past as a human society that there was equality.
Right. That was on our planet at one time.
That at one time, and it can be, and
And
it can return.
Be, yeah.
It can return. I often say that I'm actually glad I'm a woman, even though I had to go through a lot of inequality in my life, because I think it's easier for those who are always the downtrodden, and I don't like to use that word. It's easier for them to seek the light.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they've got the motivation. Mm-hmm. And yet when you look at the men in our world, they struggle a lot with having to live up to the concept of inequality.
Oh, it's really difficult.
You know, I mean, I look at them, and I have so many dear friends that spiritually they are powerhouses.
Yes.
And they've never been given that permission to be equal to what has always been thought of as the woman's right.
Yes.
To be the spiritual leader in the family. And what do we do with that? You know, how do we as women, as crones, who understand the inequality and how important it is to allow equality, how do we support the men in the world to step into their understanding of their spirituality and allow their equality? Any thoughts? That's a big subject.
Yeah, that's huge. Oh yeah, we're touching on big stuff today. Anyway, by holding it more and more in myself, in ourself first, and then allowing and extending, holding that there's a place for it. Because right now there's not a place for it.
No, there isn't.
So we have to make more of a place for it. And I really am struck, I guess, again, by the inequality that we've been taught as Americans. Mm-hmm. That we're special, that we can do anything we want in the world, and there's no payback, and you know, we're the leading edge, and so we can take and give whatever we want. And I was working with a client the other day that was, number one, in a big drug habit, but number two, really complaining about people from South America sending their children to the United States and causing this big crisis. And then I was able to really reflect on that the reason that's created is because in the United States we have such a high consumption of drugs that we demand it from South America, and that creates the violence in their culture where women and children aren't safe. Yeah. And so until we take the responsibility that my drug usage harms children in South America, then we'll never break up our own addictions.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody's ever thought of that.
Well, I did. It just came to me. It was like, one of those spirit things. Hello? Spirit bonked me on the head and said, Evy, you better be telling them about this. And I went, okay, fine. Oh, I'll tell them. Okay, so that's what I did. But the inner relationship of violence is about inequality. Yeah. And a lot of it's about I'm really important and I need my drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I need my next beer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I need my next car.
Mm-hmm.
I need my next fancy coat. Or I've got to have designer shoes. And so there's a lack of mentality, how our usage, what we wear, what we do, how we present ourselves even, speaks of inequality.
Yes, yes. You know, and who's to say that those children that have, you know, found their way to this country aren't going to be someone who contributes 1,000-fold to the betterment of this country.
Yes.
And by our thinking that they're not good enough to be in here, which really to me is really the sense behind it of everyone raising their arms up and saying, no, we don't want them here. You know, we're harming ourselves.
Yes, we are.
By not allowing them to be in here.
Right.
You know, I just, you know, I mean, I don't ever understand any of that. But then I came from a family of immigrants, and
Mine too. Yeah.
you know, if they hadn't been allowed in this country, I wouldn't be here. You know, they could have turned the ship around and they all drowned at sea.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, my family certainly has contributed to this country just like I have. But anyway,
Yes.
I'm digressing. We're not going to talk about that. I will be cutting that piece off.
That's right.
So, Evy, the glory of cutting on the floor. Is there anything that you would like to close with? Any thoughts? This has just been very, very enlightening and a delight to sit and talk with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Close to you this way.
That's right, buddies.
But it's just been, I mean, you've shed so much light on so many things and a complex concept, but you've spoken it so simply and made it so real. Is there any closing remarks or thoughts or inspiration you'd like to share?
Just to really encourage each other to allow equality in our whole beingness, to pray for it, to look for it, to explore it. Yeah. So that the possibilities then become created. Yeah. So that's my prayer, my wish.
Right. I bow to you, Evy.
Amen. Thank you.
In your truth and in your equality. And thank you so much for being a part of this today.
You're welcome. Blessings.
Bye-bye, everyone.